Around Christmas Eve, 1617, 10 fishing boats left the coast of Vardø in the far north of Norway. A storm came so fast that witnesses said the sea and the sky became one. All 10 boats sank. Roughly 40 men drowned in a single night. This was Finnmark, the northernmost edge of Danish-Norwegian territory, a coastline above the Arctic Circle where fishing was everything. Entire families depended on what the men brought back from the Barents Sea. And now, in a handful of hours, nearly every boat from the villages around Vardø was gone. The women and children left behind had no explanation that could match the scale of what had happened. Neither did the authorities. But the timing of the disaster landed next to something new, a law that gave officials a specific kind of answer. 2 months before the storm, on October 12th, 1617, King Christian IV had signed the first joint Danish-Norwegian witchcraft ordinance. The law drew a hard line. Minor folk magic, charms, remedies, fortune-telling was treated one way. But anyone accused of a pact with the devil or sorcery that caused real harm could be burned. And the law told local officials and clergy that suspects were their responsibility. For 3 years, nothing happened. The grief sat in the community. The law sat on the books. Then, around 1620, someone at Vardøhus Fortress decided to connect the two. Vardohus was the northernmost fortress in the kingdom. It was where Danish-Norwegian authority lived in Finnmark. Tax collection, military defense, and now interrogations. In January of 1621, officials brought in a woman named Mari Jorgenstatter from the nearby village of Kimball. They wanted to know about the storm. Under interrogation, Mari confessed. She said she had entered a pact with the devil. She said she had transformed into an animal and flown to a witches' gathering. And critically, she named other women. That was how the machine worked. Each confession produced new names, and each new name became a new interrogation. Within weeks, the authorities had a chain of accused women, and the chain kept growing. The central accusation was specific. The women were said to have gathered and tied knots in a length of rope or string. They spat and spoke over the knots. Then, on the night of the storm, they opened them, and the wind poured out. Wind knots. The idea had deep roots in Northern European seafaring tradition. The belief that wind could be bought, sold, or trapped in a knot. Sailors across Scandinavia knew the superstition. But under interrogation at Vardohus, a folk belief became a criminal act. The confessions said the women had caused the deaths of 40 men by sorcery. The accused women also described gatherings, flying through the air to a place called Lyderhorn, a mountain near Bergen, more than 1,000 kilometers to the south. They described feasting, dancing, board games with the devil. The details were vivid and specific, and almost certainly shaped by the questions being asked and the pressure being applied. One woman stood out in the confessions. Kirsten Sorensdatter. She was Danish, married to a local merchant, and wealthier than most of the accused. The other women's testimonies named her as the leader, what the court records called the master and admiral of the witches. In April 1621, she was executed. By the time this first wave of trials ended, 12 women had been condemned and burned. 12. From a community that had already lost 40 of its men to the sea. But Vardø was only the beginning. Over the next 70 years, the Finnmark witch trials would claim 91 lives in total. In a region with fewer than 3,000 people, that was devastating. Finnmark held a tiny fraction of Norway's population, but produced a third of the country's witchcraft death sentences. Today, on the shore in Vardø, there is a memorial. Steilneset, designed by the architect Peter Zumthor and the artist Louise Bourgeois, opened in 2011. It is a long wooden frame wrapped in sailcloth, stretched along the coast. Inside are 91 small windows, each one lit, each one bearing the name and story of a person who was executed, drawn from the same court records that convicted them. At the far end is a separate building, a single chair surrounded by flames, made by Bourgeois. Anger and endurance, preserved in bronze and fire. The storm of 1617 was real. The grief was real. What followed was a system finding a use for suffering. When a community could not accept that the sea had simply taken its men, and when the law said someone had to be responsible, the authorities built a machine. Confessions named names. Names became trials. Trials became executions. And a fishing village that had already lost nearly everything was made to lose more. 91 lights, still burning,